Many houses and shops belonging to Kosovo Albanians were set on fire, and a mosque in Suva Reka was damaged. The women, children, and elderly were sent away by the police, and then a number of the men were killed by the forces of the FRY in Serbia. The Kosovo Albanians were forced to flee, making their way in trucks, tractors, and trailers towards the border with Albania. While crossing the border, their documents and money were taken away. On 31st of March 1999, approximately 80,000 Kosovo Albanians displaced from villages in the Suva Reka municipality gathered near Belanica. The following day, forces of the FRY in Serbia shelled the village of Belanica, forcing the displaced persons to flee towards the Albanian border. Prior to crossing the border, their identification documents were taken away from them. Pitch. On or about the 27th and 28th of March 1999, in the city of Pitch, forces of the FRY in Serbia went from house to house, forcing Kosovo Albanians to leave. Some houses were set on fire, and a number of people were shot. Soldiers and police were stationed along every street, directing the Kosovo Albanians towards the town center. Once the people reached the center of town, those without cars or vehicles were forced to get on buses or trucks and were driven to the town of Prizren. Outside Prizren, the Kosovo Albanians were forced to get off the buses and trucks and walk approximately 15 kilometers to the Albanian border, where, prior to crossing the border, they were ordered to turn their identification papers over to Serb policemen. Kosovska Mitrovica. Beginning on or about the 25th of March 1999 and continuing through the middle of April 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia began moving systematically through the town of Kosovska Mitrovica. They entered the homes of Kosovo Albanians and ordered the residents to leave their houses at once and to go to the bus station. Some houses were set on fire, forcing the residents to flee to other parts of the town. At least one of the mosques of the town were burned and damaged. Over a 3-week period, the forces of the FRY in Serbia continued to expel the Kosovo Albanian residents of the town. During this period, properties belonging to Kosovo Albanians were destroyed, Kosovo Albanians were robbed of money, vehicles, and other valuables, and Kosovo Albanian women were sexually assaulted. A similar pattern was repeated in other villages in the Kosovska Mitrovica municipality, where forces of the FRY and Serbia forced Kosovo Albanians from their homes and destroyed the villages. The Kosovo Albanian residents of the municipality were forced to join convoys going to the Albanian border via the towns of Srbica, Peć, Đakovica, and Prizren. En route to the border, forces of the FRY and Serbia robbed them of valuables and seized their identity documents.
Pristina. Beginning on or about the 24th of March 1999 and continuing through the end of May 1999, Serbian police went to the homes of Kosovo Albanians in the city of Pristina and forced the residents to leave. During the course of these forced expulsions, a number of people were killed. Many of those forced from their homes went directly to the train station, while others sought shelter in nearby neighborhoods. Hundreds of ethnic Albanians, guided by Serb police at all the intersections, gathered at the train station and then were loaded onto overcrowded trains or buses after a long wait, during which time no food or water was provided. Those on the trains went as far as General Jankovic village near the Macedonian border. During the train ride, many people had their identification papers taken from them. After getting off the trains, forces of the FRY and Serbia told the Kosovo Albanians to walk along the tracks into Macedonia since the surrounding land had been mined. Those who tried to hide in Pristina were eventually expelled in a similar fashion. During the course of these forced expulsions, a number of people were killed and several women were sexually assaulted. During the same period, forces of the FRY and Serbia entered the villages of Pristina municipality, where they beat and killed many Kosovo Albanians, robbed them of their money, looted their property, and burnt their homes. Many of the villagers were taken by truck to the town of Glogovac in the municipality of Glogovac. From there, they were transported to General Jankovic and walked to the Macedonian border. Others, after making their way to the town of Uroševac, were ordered by the forces of the FRY and Serbia to take a train to General Jankovic, from where they walked across the border into Macedonia. Đakovica. By March 1999, the population of the town of Đakovica had increased significantly due to the large number of internally displaced persons who fled their villages to escape deliberate shelling by forces of the FRY and Serbia during 1998, and to escape the armed conflict between these forces and members of the Kosovo Liberation Army. The continual movement of these internally displaced persons increased after the 24th of March 1999, when, following violent expulsions in the town of Đakovica, many internally displaced persons returned from the town of Đakovica to the outlying villages, only to be expelled from these villages again by forces of the FRY and Serbia. Serb forces controlled and coordinated the movement of these internally displaced persons as they traveled from these villages to and from the town of Đakovica and finally to the border between Kosovo and the Republic of Albania. Persons traveling on foot were sent from the town of Đakovica directly toward one of several border crossings. Persons traveling in motor vehicles were routed first towards the town of Prizren before approaching the border and crossing into the Republic of Albania. From on or about the 24th of March 1999 through the 11th of May 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia began forcing residents of the town of Đakovica to leave. Forces of the FRY and Serbia spread out throughout the town and went from house to house, ordering Kosovo Albanians from their homes. In some instances, people were killed, and many persons were threatened with death. Many of the houses and shops belonging to Kosovo Albanians were set on fire, while those belonging to Serbs were protected. On the 24th of March 1999, the old mosque in Rogovo and the old historic quarter of Đakovica, which included the bazaar, the Hadum Mosque, and the adjoining Islamic library, were among the several cultural sites substantially and/or totally destroyed. During the period from the 2nd to the 4th of April 1999, thousands of Kosovo Albanians living in the town of Đakovica and neighboring villages joined a large convoy, either on foot or driving in cars, trucks and tractors, and moved to the border with Albania. Forces of the FRY and Serbia directed those fleeing along prearranged routes, and at checkpoints along the way, most Kosovo Albanians had their identification papers and license plates seized. In some instances, Yugoslav army trucks were used to transport persons to the border with Albania. In addition, during late March and April 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia forcibly expelled the Kosovo Albanian residents of many villages of the Đakovica municipality, including the villages of Dobroš, Korenica, and Meja. Many of these residents were subsequently ordered or permitted to return to their communities, only to be expelled again by forces of the FRY and Serbia. On or about the early morning hours of the 27th of April 1999, Forces of the FRY and Serbia launched a massive attack against the Caragoj, Erenik and Trava valleys of the Đakovica municipality, including the remaining residents of the aforementioned villages, in order to drive the population out of the area. A large number of soldiers and policemen were deployed, and several checkpoints were established. In Meja, Korenica and Meja Orize, a large and as yet undetermined number of Kosovo Albanian civilian males were separated from the mass of fleeing villagers, abducted and executed. Throughout the entire day, villagers under direct threat from the forces of the FRY and Serbia left their homes and joined several convoys of refugees using tractors, horse carts and cars, and eventually crossed into Albania. Forces of the FRY and Serbia confiscated the identity documents of many of the Kosovo Albanians before they crossed the border. Gnjilane. The forces of the FRY and Serbia entered the town of Prilepnica on the 6th of April 1999, or thereabouts, and ordered residents to leave, saying that the town would be mine the next day. The townspeople left and tried to go to another village, but forces of the FRY and Serbia turned them back. On the 13th of April 1999, residents of Prilepnica were again informed that the town had been evacuated by the following day. The next morning, the Kosovo Albanian residents left in a convoy of approximately 500 vehicles. Shortly after the residents left, the houses in Prilepnica were set on fire. Throughout the entire municipality of Gnjilane, forces of the FRY and Serbia systematically burned and destroyed houses, shops, cultural monuments and religious sites belonging to Kosovo Albanians, including a mosque in Vlaštica. Kosovo Albanians in other villages in Gnjilane municipality were also forced from their homes. Thousands of displaced persons from villages such as Žegra, Nosalje and Vladovo sought shelter in the village of Donja Stubla, located in the Vitina municipality. Many of these displaced persons from Gnjilane crossed Kosovo's boundary with the province of Serbia, where they suffered similar harassment and mistreatment to that which they experienced in Kosovo before entering Macedonia. Others traveled directly to Macedonia. When the Kosovo Albanians reached the border with Macedonia, forces of the FRY and Serbia confiscated their identification papers. Uroševac. During the period between the 24th of March and the 14th of April 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia shelled and attacked the villages in the Uroševac municipality, including Biba, Muhađer Prelec, Raka and Stara Selo, killing a number of residents. After the shelling, forces of the FRY and Serbia entered some of the villages, including Papas and Sojevo, and ordered the residents to leave. Other Kosovo Albanians from Varoš Selo and Mirosavljevlje fled their villages as the Serb forces entered. After the residents left their homes, the soldiers and policemen burnt the houses. The displaced persons went to the town of Uroševac, where most boarded trains which carried them to the Macedonian border, crossing at General Janković. Serb forces directed the train passengers to walk on the railroad tracks to the border. Others traveled in convoys from Uroševac to the same border crossing. At the border, Serb forces confiscated all of their documents. Kačanik. Between March and May 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked villages in the Kačanik municipality and the town of Kačanik itself. This had, as a result, the destruction of houses and the mosque in the Lira Valley. On or about the 8th of March 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked and partially burned the village of Kotlina. On the 24th of March 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked Kotlina again with heavy weapons systems and soldiers. Many of the male residents of Kotlina fled into nearby forests during this attack, while forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered the women, children and elderly to board trucks which took them towards the town of Kačanik. Those who could not fit into the trucks were compelled to walk behind them towards Kačanik. A number of male residents of Kotlina were killed during this attack, including at least 17 men whose bodies were thrown into wells. Before departing Kotlina, forces of the FRY in Serbia burnt the remainder of the village. Many of the survivors fled to Macedonia. On or about the 27th and 28th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia attacked the town of Kačanik. Forces of the FRY in Serbia harassed, detained, beat and shot many Kosovo Albanian residents of Kačanik. Thousands of persons fled to nearby forests and eventually walked across the border into Macedonia. Other displaced persons from the town of Kačanik and nearby villages walked to the village of Stagovo, where they boarded trains that took them to the Macedonian border.
On or about the 13th of April 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia surrounded the village of Slatina and the hamlet of Vata. After shelling the village, infantry troops and police entered the village and looted and burnt the houses. During this action, 13 civilians were shot and killed. Following this attack, much of the population of Slatina fled to Macedonia. On or about the 25th of May 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked the village of Dubrava in the municipality of Kačanik. During the attack, forces of the FRY and Serbia killed several Kosovo Albanian residents of Dubrava. Many residents of Dubrava formed a convoy of tractors and trailers and fled to Macedonia. Other residents fled to other villages or into forests before eventually crossing the border into Macedonia. Dečani. On or about the 29th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia surrounded and attacked the village of Beleg and other surrounding villages in the Dečani municipality. Forces of the FRY in Serbia went from house to house and told villagers to leave their houses immediately. About 300 men, women and children were moved out of their homes and gathered in a nearby field in the village of Beleg. Forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered all men and women to undress, and all their personal property was taken away. Men were separated from women and children and taken to the basement of an unfinished house near the field. Women and children were ordered to go to another house. During the night, at least 3 women were sexually assaulted. The next day, forces of the FRY in Serbia told the villagers to leave the village in trucks and tractors and go to Albania. Vučitrn. On or about the 27th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia began to burn houses in the town of Vučitrn and burned the main mosque in that town. On or about the 2nd of May 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia attacked a number of villages northeast of the town of Vučitrn, including the villages of Skrovna, Slakovce, Cecelia, and Gornja Sudimlja. The villagers were forced out of their homes, and many of their houses, shops, and religious sites were completely burnt. The villagers, as well as persons previously displaced from other communities in the Vučitrn municipality, were forced to form a convoy of approximately 20,000 people traveling on the Studime Gorge Road in the direction of the town of Vučitrn. In the course of these actions, forces of the FRY and Serbia harassed, beat, and robbed the Kosovo Albanians traveling in the convoy and killed approximately 104 Kosovo Albanians. Thousands of Kosovo Albanians in this convoy were detained by forces of the FRY and Serbia in the agricultural cooperative near the town of Vučitrn. On or about the 3rd of May 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia at the Agricultural Cooperative separated Kosovo Albanian men of military age from women, children, and the elderly. The Kosovo Albanian women, children, and elderly were directed to travel to Albania, and a number of Kosovo Albanian men were forced to drive vehicles that carried the women, children, and elderly to the Albanian border. The forces of the FRY and Serbia transported hundreds of Kosovo Albanian men of military age from the Agricultural Cooperative to a prison in the village of Smrekovica. After several weeks of detention in inhumane conditions where they were subjected to beatings, torture, and murder, many of these Kosovo Albanian men were transported to the village of Zur near the Albanian border and forced to cross the border into Albania. By these acts and omissions, Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown planned, instigated, ordered, committed, or otherwise aided and abetted the planning, preparation, or execution of Count 1, deportation, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5D of the Statute of the Tribunal. Count 2, other inhumane acts, forcible transfer. With respect to those Kosovo Albanians who were internally displaced within the territory of Kosovo, the prosecutor realleges and incorporates by references paragraphs 55 to 61 and, in particular, paragraph 59. By these acts and omissions, Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown planned, instigated, ordered, committed, or otherwise aided and abetted the planning, preparation, or execution of Count 2, other inhumane acts, forcible transfer, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5I of the Statute of the Tribunal. Counts 3 and 4, murder. The prosecutor realleges and incorporates by reference paragraphs 55 to 63. Beginning on or about January the 1st, 1999, and continuing until the 20th of June, 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia, acting at the direction, with the encouragement, or with the support of Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown, murdered hundreds of Kosovo Albanian civilians. These killings occurred in a widespread or systematic manner throughout the province of Kosovo and resulted in the deaths of numerous men, women, and children. Included among the incidents of mass killings are the following. On or about the 15th of January, 1999, in the early morning hours, the village of Račak was attacked by forces of the FRY and Serbia in Štimlja municipality. After shelling, forces of the FRY and Serbia entered the village later in the morning and began conducting house-to-house searches. Villagers who attempted to flee from the forces of the FRY and Serbia were shot throughout the village. A group of approximately 25 men attempted to hide in a building, but were discovered by the forces of the FRY and the police. They were beaten and then were removed to a nearby hill where they were shot and killed. Altogether, the forces of the FRY and Serbia killed approximately 45 Kosovo Albanians in and around Račak. Those persons killed who are known by name are set forth in Schedule A, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 25th of March, 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia surrounded and attacked the village of Bela Crkva in Orahovac municipality. Many of the residents of Bela Crkva fled along the Belaja River outside the village and were forced to seek shelter at a railroad bridge. As the forces of the FRY in Serbia approached the bridge, they opened fire on a number of villagers, killing 12 persons, including 10 women and children. The 2-year-old child survived this incident. The forces of the FRY in Serbia then ordered the remaining villagers out of the stream bed, at which time the men and older boys were separated from the elderly men, women, and children. The forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered the men and older boys to strip and then systematically robbed them of all valuables. The women and children were then ordered to leave towards an adjacent village called Zrze. A doctor from Bela Crkva attempted to speak with the commander of the attacking forces, but he was shot and killed, as was his nephew. The remaining men and older boys were then ordered back into the stream bed. After they complied, the forces of the FRY in Serbia opened fire on these men and older boys, killing approximately 65 Kosovo Albanians. A number of men and older boys survived this incident, and other persons hiding in the vicinity also witnessed this incident. In addition, forces of the FRY in Serbia also killed 6 men found hiding in an irrigation ditch in the vicinity. Those persons killed, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule B, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 25th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia attacked the villages of Mala Kruša and Velika Kruša in Orahovac municipality. The villagers of Mala Kruša took refuge in a forested area outside Mala Kruša, where they were able to observe forces of the FRY in Serbia systematically looting and burning their houses. The villagers subsequently took refuge in the house of Seđe Batuša, which is located on the outskirts of Mala Kruša. During the morning of the 26th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia located the villages. The police forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered the women and small children to leave the area and go to Albania. The forces of the FRY in Serbia detained and searched the men and boys and confiscated their identity documents and valuables. Subsequently, the forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered the men and boys, under threat of death, to walk to an unoccupied house in Mala Kruša. The forces of the FRY in Serbia forced the men and boys to enter the house. When the men and boys were assembled inside, the forces of the FRY in Serbia opened fire with machine guns on the group. After several minutes of gunfire, forces of the FRY in Serbia set fire to the house in order to burn the bodies. As a result of the shootings and fire, approximately 105 Kosovo Albanian men and boys died. Those persons killed, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule C, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 26th of March 1999, in the morning hours, forces of the FRY in Serbia surrounded the vicinity of the Berisha family compound in the town of Suvareka. Tanks were positioned close to and pointing in the direction of the houses. The forces of the FRY in Serbia ordered the occupants out of one of the houses. Men were separated from women and children, and 6 members of the family were killed. The remaining family members were herded towards a coffee shop by forces of the FRY in Serbia. Those family members were herded along with 3 extended Berisha family groups into the coffee shop. Forces of the FRY in Serbia then walked into the coffee shop and opened fire on the persons inside. Explosives were also thrown into the shop. At least 44 civilians were killed and others seriously wounded during this action. The bodies of the victims were dragged out of the shop and placed in the rear of a truck, which was then driven in the direction of Prizren. 3 injured persons, thrown in among the other bodies, jumped out of the truck en route to Prizren. Property pertaining to at least 6 of the persons killed in the coffee shop were found in a clandestine mass gravesite at a VJ firing range near Korusha. In addition, identification documents pertaining to at least 5 of the persons killed in the coffee shop were founded on bodies exhumed from a clandestine mass grave located in Batajnica near Belgrade in Serbia. Those persons killed, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule K, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the evening of the 26th of March 1999, in the town of Đakovica, forces of the FRY in Serbia came to a house at 134A Imer Grezda Street. The women and children inside the house were separated from the men and were ordered to go upstairs. The forces of the FRY in Serbia then shot and killed the 6 Kosovo Albanian men who were in the house. The names of those killed are set forth in Schedule D, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 26th of March 1999, in the morning hours, forces of the FRY in Serbia attacked the village of Padalište, Istok municipality. As the forces of the FRY in Serbia entered the village, they fired on houses and on villagers who attempted to flee. 8 persons of the Beke Imerai family were forced from their home and were killed in front of their house. Other residents of Padalište village were killed at their homes and in a stream bed near the village. Altogether, forces of the FRY in Serbia killed approximately 20 Kosovo Albanians from Padalište. Those persons killed, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule E, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 27th of March 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked the village of Ibiza with heavy weapons. At least 4,500 villagers from Ibiza and surrounding villages took refuge in a meadow in Ibiza. On the 28th of March 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia surrounded the villagers and approached them demanding money. After the forces of the FRY in Serbia stole the villagers' valuables, the men were separated from the women and small children. The men were then further divided into 2 groups, one of which was sent to a nearby hill and the other was sent to a nearby stream bed. The forces of the FRY and Serbia then fired upon both groups of men, and at least 116 Kosovo Albanian men were killed on that occasion. Also, on the 28th of March 1999, the women and children gathered at Izbica were forced to leave the area and walk towards Albania. 2 elderly, disabled women were sitting on a tractor trailer, unable to walk. Forces of the FRY in Serbia set the tractor trailer on fire and the 2 women were burned alive. Those persons killed in Izbica, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule F, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment.
On or about the late evening of the 1st of April 1999, in the early morning hours of the 2nd of April 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia launched an operation against the Cherim district of Đakovica. Over a period of several hours, the FRY in Serbia forcibly entered houses of Kosovo Albanians in the Cherim district, killing the occupants and then setting fire to the buildings. Dozens of homes were destroyed and over 50 persons were killed. For example, in a house located at 157 Miloš Gilić Street, forces of the FRY in Serbia shot the 20 occupants and then set fire to the house. As a result of the shootings and the fire set by the forces of the FRY in Serbia at this single location, 20 Kosovo Albanians were killed, of whom 19 were women and children. The names of those killed at this location are set forth in Schedule G, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the early morning hours of the 27th of April 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia launched a massive attack against the Kosovo Albanian population of the Caragojs, Erenik and Trava valleys of Đakovo municipality in order to drive the population out of the area. A large number of forces were deployed and several checkpoints were established. Throughout the entire day, Villagers, under direct threat from the forces of the FRY in Serbia, left their homes and joined several convoys of refugees using tractors, horse carts and cars. In Meja, Korenica and Meja Orize, a large and as yet undetermined number of Kosovo Albanian civilian males were separated from the mass of fleeing villagers and abducted. Many of these men were summarily executed, and approximately 300 persons are still missing. Identity documents pertaining to at least 7 persons who were last seen at Meja on the 27th of April 1999 were found on bodies exhumed from a clandestine mass grave located in Batajnica near Belgrade, Serbia. Those persons killed who are known by name are set forth in Schedule 1, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 2nd of May 1999, forces of the FRY and Serbia attacked several villages northeast of the town of Vučitrn, including Skrona, Gamisha, Zakovce, and Milenica. The villagers were forced out from their homes, and many of their houses, shops, and religious sites were completely burnt. They were subsequently forced into a convoy of approximately 20,000 people traveling on the Stuldime Gorge Road in the direction of the town of Vučitrn. In the course of these actions, forces of the FRY and Serbia harassed, beat, and killed approximately 104 Kosovo Albanians. Those persons killed, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule H, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. On or about the 22nd of May 1999, in the early morning hours, a uniformed person in the Dubrava prison complex of the Istok municipality announced from a watchtower that all prisoners were to gather their personal belongings and line up on the sports field at the prison complex for transfer to the prison in Niš, Serbia. Within a very short time, hundreds of prisoners had gathered at the sports field with bags of personal belongings and lined up in rows to await transport. Without warning, uniformed persons opened fire on the prisoners from the watchtower, from holes in the perimeter wall, and from gun emplacements beyond the wall. Many prisoners were killed outright and others wounded. On or about the 23rd of May 1999, in the afternoon, forces of the FRY in Serbia threw grenades and shot into the drains, sewers, buildings and basements, killing and wounding many additional prisoners who had sought refuge in those locations after the events of the previous day. Altogether, approximately 50 prisoners were killed. Many of the murdered persons remain unidentified. However, the names of those persons who are known to have been killed are set forth in Schedule J, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. During the period between March 1999 and May 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia launched a series of massive offensives against several villages in the municipality of Kačanik, which resulted in the murder of over 100 civilians. On or about the 24th of March 1999, the village of Kotlina was attacked by forces of the FRY in Serbia. In the course of the attack, most of the houses were burnt down. At least 17 persons were killed. Some of those killed were captured in the woods, executed, and then thrown into wells. Explosives were thrown on top of the wells. On or about the 13th of April 1999, forces of the FRY in Serbia surrounded the village of Slatina and the hamlet of Vata. After shelling the village, infantry troops and police entered the village and looted and burnt the houses. During this action, 13 civilians were shot and killed. On or about the 21st of May 1999, the village of Stagovo was surrounded by forces of the FRY in Serbia. The population tried to escape toward the mountains east of the village. During this action, at least 12 persons were killed. Most of the village was looted and burnt down. On or about the 25th of May 1999, forces of FRY and Serbia surrounded the village of Dubrava. As the forces entered the village, the population was ordered to gather at the school and leave the village on tractors. Men were then separated from women and children. During this action, 4 men were killed. In addition, 4 members of the Chori family were killed while trying to escape towards the woods. Those persons killed in the municipality of Kačanik, who are known by name, are set forth in Schedule L, which is attached as an appendix to this indictment. By these acts and omissions, Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown planned, instigated, ordered, committed, or otherwise aided and abetted the planning, preparation, and execution of the following acts. Count 3, murder. A crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5A of the Statute of the Tribunal. Count 4, murder. A violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of the Tribunal and recognized by Article 3.1a, murder of the Geneva Conventions. Count 5, persecutions. The prosecutor re-alleges from paragraph 55 to 66 and incorporates them into this count, beginning on or about the 1st of January 1999 and continuing until the 20th of June 1999. The forces of the FRY and Serbia, acting at the direction, with the encouragement or with the support of Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown, utilized the means and methods set forth in paragraphs 55 to 66 to execute a campaign of persecution against the Kosovo Albanian civilian population based on political, racial, or religious grounds. These persecutions included the following means, but were not limited to: the forcible transfer and deportation of forces by the FRY and Serbia of approximately 800,000 Kosovo Albanian civilians, as described in paragraphs 55 to 64. The murder of hundreds of Kosovo Albanian civilians by forces of the FRY and Serbia, as described in paragraphs 65 to 66. The sexual assault of forces of the FRY and Serbia of Kosovo Albanians, in particular women, including the sexual assaults described in paragraphs 57 and 63. The wanton destruction or damage of Kosovo Albanian religious sites. During and after the attacks on the towns and villages, forces of FRY and Serbia systematically damaged and destroyed cultural monuments and Muslim sacred sites. Mosques were shelled, burned, and dynamited throughout the province. Included among the incidents are the following: the damage and or destruction of mosques in Vučitrn, Suva Reka, Celina, Rogovo, Bela Crkva, Čirez, Kotlina, Ivaja, Brestovac, Velika Kruša, Kosovska Mitrovica, Vlaštica, Landovica, and Đakovica, as described in paragraph 63. By these acts and omissions, Slobodan Milošević and others known and unknown planned, instigated, ordered, committed, or otherwise aided and abetted the planning, preparation, and execution of the following act. Count 5, persecution on political, racial, and religious grounds, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the Statute of the Tribunal. General allegations. At all times relevant to this indictment, a state of armed conflict existed in Kosovo in the FRY. All acts and omissions charged as crimes against humanity were part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against the Kosovo Albanian civilian population of Kosovo in the FRY. Additional facts.
And that would be a convenient time to adjourn. We'll adjourn now for an hour and a half, 2:30.
All rise, priez vous le fait.